Hi there, my name's Mick Greenwood and I am a tour guide and a taxi driver, and I'd like to tell you some tales of Mayfair. As we know, Mayfair is one of the most expensive and affluent areas in London. It's full of five-star hotels and Michelin-starred restaurants and world-famous streets such as Savile Row, home to the traditional bespoke tailoring industry, and Bond Street, which has got the highest density of haute couture stores anywhere in the world. And if you're playing Monopoly and you've got a hotel on Mayfair, then you're probably going to win. Geographically speaking, it's this area with the blue line around it. It's west of Soho, east of Hyde Park and Park Lane, south of Marylebone and this, which is the old Roman road. We call it Oxford Street. There's Primark. And north of Piccadilly, with St James Palace around here. Etymologically speaking, the name comes from a fair that was held every May for 2 weeks in the last part of the 17th, early 18th century. That area is now known as Shepherd Market. And this fair had a reputation for being rather raucous, riotous, and rowdy. So the local residents, who were mostly aristocrats, decided the best way to get rid of this noisy neighbour was to build on the land. So by 1730, the fair was no more, but the name remained. The development of Mayfair began in the 1660s, mostly by aristocratic estates, great and noble estates. And they developed all of this, especially down Piccadilly. And this development shifted aristocratic London from Soho and Covent Garden, which you can just about see on the right of the map, to Mayfair, mostly because of its proximity to the royal palace, which in those days was St James Palace. Buckingham Palace wasn't even built. So all along here, and quite a few inside, were noblemen's palaces. And this is a good example of one. This is Devonshire House, owned by the Duke of Devonshire. But there were a lot of other ones as well. And the only estate that remains in the hands of the descendants of the original developers is the Grosvenor estate. And this is the coat of arms of the Grosvenor family. They are an ancient Cheshire landowning family that can trace their ancestry all the way back to 1066, the Norman Conquest. This is where they live now. Not bad, eh? It's all of that. And their connection with Mayfair goes back to 1677, when Sir Thomas Grosvenor, the third baronet, he was wealthy, he was relatively young, he was 21, and he was politically ambitious, and he wanted land near Parliament because he was soon to become a member of Parliament. So he needed somewhere close to work. And he married an heiress who happened to have land near Parliament. Her name was Mary Davis. And in 1677, when they married, she was 12, but that was not unusual, unfortunately, at the time. Mary Davis's story was her father, Alexander Davis, who was a scrivener, a legal clerk. This would have been the tools of his trade. He inherited land when his great uncle, Sir Hugh Audley, which is where we get the name Audley Street from, he left Alexander some land, the Manor of Ebury. Now, the Manor of Ebury we would describe as being from Millbank down in Pimlico, all the way through Belgravia, some of Knightsbridge, and then the north part of Mayfair, which in those days was called the 100 acre. And all of this land was undeveloped. So Alexander decided to develop, starting with here, Millbank. But unfortunately, he didn't get very far through his project because he, like many other Londoners, were taken by the Great Sickness, the Great Plague of 1665. And because Alexander died intestate, the land went to his descendant, which was the 6-month-old Mary. Now, her mother realized what a little asset Mary was, so she started making plans to have little Mary Davis sold to the highest bidder, married to an aristocrat preferably. And plans were made when she was 8 that she would marry the son of Lord Berkeley when she was of the legal age to wed, which was 12. Unfortunately, this arrangement fell through for one reason or another. So up steps Sir Thomas Grosvenor, and he married Mary Davis in St Clement Danes Church in Covent Garden in 1677. He was 21, she was 12, and now she's Lady Grosvenor. She gave him 3 sons over the years. The eldest was Sir Richard Grosvenor, and also a daughter who was born just after Sir Thomas died in 1700. Then, amid concerns for her mental health, hardly surprising given her upbringing, she fled to Paris, and there she lived with the expatriate Catholic community in France, which had thrived since the exile of King James II. She married, amidst very suspicious circumstances, the brother of a priest she knew. Now, this news of this wedding got back to Sir Richard Grosvenor. Now, he was obviously very worried about his mother's mental health, but also about his inheritance. That could go up the spout. So, using the best legal teams he could find in England and in France, he fought to have the marriage annulled, to have this guy who married his mother prosecuted for coercing a woman into marriage. Not the first time it had happened to Mary, by the way. And also to have Mary committed for insanity. And he succeeded on all 3 counts. So by 1711, the land had been signed over to him by an act of parliament, and he decided to develop it. Why not? And he began with this, Grosvenor Square. This is in 1725, one of the grandest squares in London. Not quite the biggest. There's one bigger, Lincoln's Inn Fields, but it's pretty big. And over the next century and a half, his descendants, Mary's descendants, the Grosvenors, who later became the Dukes of Westminster, developed the rest of their land. Let me just remind you what that was. It was Pimlico, it was Belgravia, it was Knightsbridge, or part of it, and Mayfair. This made them the biggest landowners in London. And with all this property, not just in London, but overseas and up north and everywhere, they amassed the largest private fortune that the UK has ever seen. They are worth approximately, conservatively, £20 billion. So what happened to poor Mary? Well, as you can see by the dates there, she died in 1730. She was in her 60s. She was being cared for, but she was pretty much alone, and she was mad, so they said. And she was buried in St Margaret's Church, which is right next to Westminster Abbey. St Margaret's is the little one on the left. Westminster Abbey is a rather bigger one on the right. But the sad thing about poor Mary is that this daughter of a scrivener, a legal clerk, just like, she died without leaving anything really in her own hand. No journals or diaries to speak of. All we can find out about her is through other legal documents written by other legal clerks, other scriveners, just like her dad. And she has become like a footnote, a mere detail in the history and the development of one of the most affluent and expensive areas in London, which happens to be Mayfair. Well, I hope you can join me for the next tale of Mayfair. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.